بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Imam Hossein alayhi salam said in his infamous supplication on the day of Arafah, يا من سترني من الآباء والأمهات أن يزجروني، ومن العشائر والإخوان أن يعيروني، ومن السلاطين أن يعاقبوني، ولو اطلعوا يا مولاي على ما اطلعت عليه مني إذا ما أنظروني ولرفضوني وقطعوني. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Elders, sisters, brothers, friends, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight is the night of Hussein. It's the eve of Ashura. This day that has left a mark so many decades ago, so many centuries ago, more than 1,000 years ago. This day on the year 61 Hijri, on an eve like this, on a day like tomorrow, Imam Hossein implemented Imam Hossein delivered the important critical step of his revolution. On that day, in the year 61 Hijri, it was a dividing line in history. So tonight, it's not appropriate to talk about anything except Hussein. And tonight, I want to tell you the story of Hussein. But not the story that you might have recalled, not the story that started about 10 days before the day of Ashura, or a bit longer perhaps. Not the story of the day of Ashura itself in that year, but the story that preceded it. The story that made that day so special. This is not about a man who led a revolution, had lots of supporters who betrayed him, ended up on his own with a family and children, ended up with very limited support on a difficult day, thirsty, and died in a very harsh, in a very sad, in a heartbreaking way. That's not the story that I want to tell today. This is part of the story. But the story is far bigger than this, far more important than this. And I think by understanding the context of it, you will see a very different story. Like I said, this is not about the tragic part of the story, which will come, but rather about a different story, a story of a man who was able to achieve victory in a near impossible, in a seemingly impossible situation. A man that was able to transform one of the fastest rising and most powerful empires of its time. transformed it, and within 70 years or so, the regime that he fought against collapsed. Another one was formed that created much of the foundations of the civilization we have today in terms of knowledge and institutions. An event that affected humanity almost every day and age. You find some effect. And here I'm not talking theory. I'm talking about an event that inspired South Africa and Nelson Mandela to get rid of the apartheid, as he says. A system that inspired India and the Mahatma Gandhi to achieve independence, as he said. An event that inspired America and the man who wanted racial equality, the man who had a dream, Martin Luther King, was inspired by Hussein. What was this event and how did it manage to create so much impact is the question. And so when we remember the tragedy, when we remember the events, we need to put them in that context. You may say, why do we cry then? Why do we cry for an event that was so successful? For a day that was so victorious? Why do we cry? Well, there are two things to say here. First, crying is an emotion. It's an overflow of emotion. It's not necessarily about something negative. People cry on their wedding days. People cry when they win tournaments. People cry when they have something major, impactful that happens to them. It's really about reaching a level of emotion that's so deep that there's only one way to express it. We tend to get this more when we're sad than when we're happy, but it happens in both ways. So when we cry, a lot of what we do is because of love. And when we remember Hussein, we don't always remember the negative, sad events, but we still cry. Because there is something, a bond that's far bigger than sadness. But there is also sadness, because somebody like that, who had made so much contribution to humanity, deserved to be treated much better than the way he was. And his family deserved a much better treatment than the way they were treated. So there is sadness, and there is a lot of love. And it's that, this is what we have today, and this is why we both cry and commemorate and celebrate. Cry, but feel very confident. Cry, but be proud. And when you go through this story, you will see where these pieces came from. You'll see why the only appropriate way to remember Hussein is in this mix, is with this kind of combination. The story of Imam Hossein didn't start on the year 61 Hijri. Actually started years before that. It's the story of Hussein is the story of Islam. It's not just because the Prophet said, Husaynun minni wa ana min Hussein, which is a bit of an interesting statement. Husaynun minni makes sense. Hussein is his grandchild, right? Hussein is from him genetically. Hussein is from me. Okay, I understand that, he's your grandchild. Why are you from Hussein then? Why would a granddad be from his own grandchild? And what the Prophet is doing there is making that connection, saying this is one piece. You cannot distinguish between the two. You can start this way and you find Hussein and Prophet. You start from this way and you find Hussein and Prophet. And the two are the same. Whichever side you start from, you end up with the other. And there's a very good reason for that. And so to really understand the language, the words, the phrases that were repeated on the day of Ashura, we need to understand the context, where they came from, those names, those references. Islam started, as I mentioned on a previous night, in an area that was dominated by tribal values, a class system. There was an elite that was powerful and rich, and there was a majority that was poor. And there was a movement. There were two main, amongst the most respected tribe, Quraysh, there were two main branches. There's the branch of Umayyah and the branch of Hashim. Hashim is the uncle of Umayyah. Hashim is the uncle of Umayyah. Umayyah is the son of Abd Shams, who is the brother of Hashim. And they're both the sons of Qusay. But there was rivalry between these two brothers. Sacrificed everything he had. Abu Talib, the father of the Imam Ali alayhi salam, sacrificed everything he had to protect the Prophet. And the other side was led practically by Abu Sufyan, who was the son of Abu Sufyan ibn Harb ibn Umayyah, the grandson of Umayyah, the father of Muawiyah, the grandfather of Yazid. And you'll see how this rivalry, this perceived challenge, tension, as Banu Umayyah saw it, they saw the Banu Hashim as their equivalents who have become much superior to them. And they did everything to slow them down. But you will see this. So it's not just motivated by tribal rivalry, rather it's much more by interests. It's rather by models, two models. One model wanted a system of classes where you are at the top and everybody else follows, and that required leadership to remain within the tribe of Quraysh and within Quraysh amongst the leaders of Quraysh. And this term Quraysh was repeated for the first at least 100 years of Islam. At least, repeatedly. All major events, Quraysh, not Quraysh. Who should be in charge? How much should the role of Quraysh become? Quraysh here doesn't just symbolize a tribe, my brothers, my sisters. Quraysh is a value system. Quraysh is the old pre-Islamic set of values. That's what Quraysh is. If you want to understand it, that's what it was. Quraysh means tribe in its hierarchy within the tribe, which means pay should be graded according to where you are in the tribe, which meant power and influence and who should be in charge and who should fight. Those who die are from the peripheries, those who gain the rewards are from the center, and all that. It's a system which was challenged by Islam and by the Prophet. And so when the Prophet of Islam moved to Medina and established this governance system in Medina, the first battle, after much effort to kill him in Mecca, that failed, the first battle was held in the Battle of Badr. Abu Sufyan had a role in Badr. He was leading the caravan that escaped. Who was the leader of the disbelievers on the day of Badr? Abu Sufyan's father-in-law. And Muawiyah's grandfather, his mother's father. So you had two sides. One side is the Prophet and Imam Ali and Hamza, Banu Hashim from the tribe of Quraysh. The other side is led by Banu Umayyah of the tribe of Quraysh. One represented Islam, one represented everything else but Islam. And when the battle erupted, Banu Hashim won, Islam won. Who were the key players on that day? Hamza and Ali ibn Abi Talib. Who were those killed? The grandfather of Muawiyah. Fast forward, Battle of Uhud. Who was the leader of the disbelievers? Abu Sufyan. Who was a key player in the event? Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, the mother of Muawiyah. What did she do on the day? She commissioned a man to kill Hamza from Quraysh, from Banu Hashim, one of the strongest and most important fighters in the camp of the Prophet. He wasn't just killed, his body was mutilated. She chewed his liver and heart after killing him. There's that much hatred. This is the household within which Muawiyah grew up. Fast forward, Ma'rakat al-Khandaq. Who's the hero of it? Ali ibn Abi Talib. Who's the leader of the opposition? Abu Sufyan. Do you see something happening here? Do you see a trend? And so when the Prophet established a system and Imam Ali alayhi salam was nominated, was appointed to succeed, that was perceived, rightly so, by Quraysh as the biggest threat. They couldn't defeat the Prophet. If they allowed the legacy to continue, they will be defeated. And they had to stop it at any cost. And so the argument that was put for why Ali wasn't allowed, if you read history, this is the argument of Umar ibn al-Khattab with Abdullah ibn Abbas. He says you were not allowed because Quraysh, remember that word? Quraysh did not want to give you prophethood and leadership, as if prophethood was given to the Prophet by Quraysh, not by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the matters for people should be decided by Quraysh, and Quraysh chooses how to distribute positions of power. And Quraysh doesn't give two positions of power to one section, because that will give them dominance. And then when Uthman became, from Banu Umayyah, when he became the third successor to the Prophet, he distributed wealth amongst Banu Umayyah and redressed the balance, that the Prophet teared down the system and it was gradually being rebuilt, the climax of which was at the time of Uthman. Essentially, the old values were being reintroduced. Almost the reintroduction of the values was complete. Then Imam Ali alayhi salam came. Again, redressed the balance. It was through a popular uprising. He was backed by the vast majority of people, but the elite didn't want that to happen. And then Abu Sufyan, then after the murder of Imam Ali alayhi salam, the son of Abu Sufyan, Muawiyah, rebelled. And we have a whole series of battles. Al-Jamal, Siffin, Al-Nahrawan, where you see again the same pathways, the same viewpoints on the world clashing. And so this wasn't, when Muawiyah fights Ali ibn Abi Talib, he's not simply fighting because he wanted power for himself simply. He had he grew up in an environment that saw the Prophet as a rival that had defeated him. And this is why, by the way, years later when Imam Hossein is killed and the family of the Imam go to Damascus, he's talking about Yawmun biyawmi Badr. This is a defeat. This is our retaliation for Badr, when your granddad killed my granddad. When Ali, Hussein's father, and Zayn al-Abidin's granddad killed the leaders of Quraysh in Badr, which were the granddad, including granddad and uncle of Muawiyah, Yazid's father. So that wasn't forgotten. That was part of the memory that influenced the politics and influenced the decision making. And part of it is personal interests and that old system versus the new system. Now what is crucial here is, there's something here really important that Hussein had to deal with. He was faced with this situation where if you want to implement new values, one of the easiest new laws, new values, one of the easiest and most effective ways of doing so is to create a state, a constitution, and then people implement it. You create an environment, like we've been talking, that would nurture it, that would internalize it. But there's no risk. The problem with a state is it's powerful. Its values become law. Its values become dominant. It's not a problem if the state is led by an infallible like the Prophet. So that association was fine. It's not a problem if that association is between Ali ibn Abi Talib and the laws of Islam, because his action is law. But it is a major problem if that state is led by Muawiyah or anybody else who is fallible. And so Hussein was in a situation where the values that his grandfather has ingrained told people to listen to this person who is in the position of the leader of the state, because that was important for the early days, because Imam was part of the system. But now people say, well, the Imam is Muawiyah, and Muawiyah does what he wants, and Muawiyah can change the laws of the Prophet. And Hussein is in a position where he has to sever that link, has to create a new system whereby Islam, in an environment where we have fallible people, where it's not direct access to infallibles, Islam is taken from experts who are knowledgeable in their field, and government is run by politicians who obey the law. It's not the actions of a politician that is law. That system had to be broken. And Yazid and his offspring and everybody else can only rule if that bond is strong. If they say we rule in the name of Islam and what we do is Islam. And so Hussein had to break this link in an environment where the state was powerful, and all the messages before that reinforced this message. He had to essentially remove this holy cloak on the position of the head of state. He had to destroy that link. And that was a big challenge. But he succeeded, and you see in the Muslim world, all the Muslim world, all schools of thought, regardless of who they are, Sunni and Shia, have moved on from that point onwards, and today, this link is broken. The leader of the state is not holy by any stretch of imagination. He has to cross-check his action against law, which is developed by experts. There's always a scholar in our system of Ahl Bayt, there's always a marji' who is an expert in law, and there is a leader. But never this connection. So in all implementations, even in the non-Shia world, you find the same thing. You always have a ruler who's politically in charge, and there is an institution. In the Sunni world, usually the religious institution is controlled by the state. In the Shia world, the religious institution is independent and superior often to the politicians. That's how we have it. This is the result of Hussein's action. This is something we often miss. Our political systems and anything that moved on beyond that date was an achievement of Hussein. But how do you do that? So Hussein had this situation when Muawiyah died, and Muawiyah kept a face. Muawiyah had battles with Imam Ali alayhi salam, but always associated himself with religion. Muawiyah understood the value of religion, and that he should be ruling in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was really important. And Yazid had to continue the same legacy. And so when Muawiyah died in Rajab, in the month of Rajab, in the year 60 Hijri, 6 months approximately before the day of Ashura. And Muawiyah has appointed, and that's a big change in system. It was always each person is chosen. Now the new ruler is appointed and is representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the message. That you appoint your successor, who happens to be your son usually, and they are appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot rise against them. And Hussein needed to do two things. Needed to break that link, but needed to save people who had the knowledge. Remember the legacy of Imam al-Hassan? If he takes all the companions to a war where it's 70,000 against 70,000, 100,000 against 50,000, it doesn't matter who ends up winning that battle. The Imam and Islam would lose the war. Do you know why? Because if you have such a war internally that kills so many thousands of people, the Roman Empire is sitting at the door. They'll wait for them to kill each other, and they'll come in and take everything. And there's no Islam after that. So he had to weaken the state without weakening Islam. Destroy the political system, but provide an alternative. Preserve life as much as possible. Keep those people who had credibility alive and well, so they remember the Prophet and pass the message. Yet shake the foundation that has existed in that system over these years since the foundation, for 60 years at least, since Hijrah, from the beginning of Hijrah to year 60, when the revolution happened. 60 years of association between these two positions, of religious leadership and scholarship and the head of state. Now, Yazid knew by far the most important person in the Islamic State is Hussein. Hussein is the only person that can cause trouble. In fact, Muawiyah told his son, be careful of Hussein, and a couple of others, but Hussein is clearly the important one. Because of his legacy, because of his connection. Hussein wasn't a young man then. Hussein had lived at the time of the Prophet. Hussein was in his late 50s, approximately 57, 56, 57. And let's just think about it. What are the options of Yazid? What options does he have? He wants Hussein to pay allegiance to Yazid and all goes well. That's what he wants. He sends a letter to the governor of Medina. Tells him, bring Hussein, tell him that Muawiyah died, he appointed Yazid, and we expect you to pay allegiance or else. Hussein, of course, has to refuse. And if Hussein refuses, what are the options of Yazid, realistically? Let's take them in order. There are 5 options, main options. One is give up and say yes to Hussein. Hussein says, I'm rejecting you, I should be the one in charge. Yazid says, okay. Hussein wins, Yazid loses. 2, let the Imam spread his message. Ignore him, basically. Let him say no, but ignore him. Don't do anything. Hussein wins, Yazid loses. Take him to prison. Silence him. Take him away from people. Yazid wins, Hussein loses. Kill him in secret. Yazid wins, Hussein loses. Kill him publicly. Yazid loses, Hussein wins. Essentially, there are 5 options. 3 of them are the ones where the Imam al-Hussein would win strategically. Either Yazid gives up, or lets Imam Hussein speak, or kills Imam al-Hussein in a public, dramatic way. Yazid wants 2 options: imprison him or kill him in secret, so no one notices. And that was the battle, that's how it unfolded. So when Yazid brought Hussein, the governor, the representative of Yazid in Medina brought Imam al-Hussein to his place, he wanted him to pay allegiance there and then. Imam al-Hussein anticipated that. He brought in a bunch of soldiers from Banu Hashim waiting outside. Told them, if I raise my voice, you walk in very quickly. You storm the doors and protect me. So the governor in the palace knew. He lost the balance of power. So he tells Hussein, and just, I'm going to be telling you the text in Arabic as well, just to give you a flavor of the conversation. Even if you don't understand it, it gives you a flavor of what it sounds like, and I'll translate it always before I say it in Arabic. When that happened, he told, and Imam al-Hussein responded, when he told him you should pay allegiance, Imam Hussein said, well, okay. Give us till the morning. Let's think about it until the morning. But so the guy said, just pay your allegiance now, let's just get it over and done with. So I said, well, someone like me, you want someone like me to give their allegiance in public, right? Doing it in secret is of no use, right? Yazid wants the whole nation to know Hussein said yes, because the whole nation is waiting for Hussein to say yes. If he doesn't say yes, there's no point. So you have to say it. Hussein says, well, you want me to say it in public, right? He says, yes. He says, okay, give me till the morning. A guy by the name of Marwan is sitting in that room. Says, don't let him leave. If he leaves here, you're in trouble. Make him say it now or kill him. The guy knew what he was talking about, because they can kill him in secret and say, I don't know, he had food poisoning, something happened. Hussein raised his voice. The army outside, the little army outside, would storm the palace. And then Hussein challenged him, said, you kill me? And outlined step 1, the first public announcement of his desire to reject Yazid. He said, someone like me cannot pay allegiance to someone like Yazid. I'm the legacy of the Prophet, and Yazid is somebody who commits sins, who kills innocent people, who is a drunkard, effectively. He drinks in public, and someone like me cannot pay allegiance to someone like him. But they couldn't kill him because he had support. But Imam Hussein continued, but we'll see until the morning who ends up winning this battle, and leaves. Now, I started this conversation by reciting, just to show you that this was work in progress over many years. I started by reciting a couple of lines from Dua al-Hussein, the supplication of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Arafah. This was done years before this revolution, when Muawiyah was alive. Imam al-Hussein says, وَمِنَ السَّلَاطِينِ أَن يُعَاقِبُونِي وَلَوِ اطَّلَعُوا يَا مَوْلَايَ عَلَى مَا اطَّلَعْتَ عَلَيْهِ مِنِّي إِذًا مَا أَنظَرُونِي وَلَا رَفَضُونِي وَقَطَعُونِي. He's saying, and that you protected me from the aggressing governors, and had they known what you know that I'm planning, they would have not given me time, and they would have killed me. This is in Dua al-Hussein Yawm Arafah that you recite on the day of Arafah, years before the revolution. He had a plan. It was waiting for the right moment. And so the governor of Medina couldn't do anything. Hussein left. That night, Imam al-Hussein headed to his grandfather's, the grave of his grandfather, the Prophet ﷺ, and said his farewell to his grandfather and headed to Mecca. This is here an interesting question. Why would you go to Mecca when your supporters are in Iraq? Mecca is the wrong way. Hussein knows the map. Why would you do that? If you had supporters in Iraq, go there as quickly as possible before they set up an army, and then you can raise support. And Iraq is, from where he was in Medina, Iraq is northeast. Mecca is west. Why would you do that? Because Hussein had a plan. What he was doing is to build, to raise the profile of the event. What he was planning to do is to create an event that would sever that link between the holiness, destroy the holiness, this cloak of holiness on the governor, that would expose Yazid for what he really is and protect life and minimize damage at the same time. Seemingly impossible. So Hussein headed to Mecca. That's question one, which is odd, right? Question two, they advised him, they said, you know what, if you're heading to Mecca, take the minor roads, because they will chase you and kill you. So he said, no, I'll take the main road. This is Sha'ban. You know, there are a lot of people do Umrah in Rajab and Sha'ban, right? So people were returning from Umrah on the main road. Hussein was heading to Mecca. And the beauty of that design is that these people come all over the world. You can't arrest all of them and kill all of them. They happen to come from all over the world to that location and then go back home. How can you arrest all of them? Exactly the same strategy that his grandfather, the Prophet ﷺ, did on the day of Ghadir, when he announced it after Hajj. So immediately people spread all over the place, and you will never know who heard it and who didn't. And that's the most narrated hadith of all time. Hadith al-Ghadir, when he appointed Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam al-Hussein was following the same legacy, the same strategy. He headed to Mecca using the main route. And people were telling him, why are you going to Mecca? Al-Hussein is in Mecca. Yazid, here's the news. So plan one, while Yazid doesn't want to give up on the governorship, he cannot let Hussein speak, he knows that. He cannot imprison him because he's now somewhere else. So he has two options, kill him in secret or kill him publicly. And so Yazid, of course, wants to kill Imam Hussein in secret. Imam Hussein stays in Mecca until the season of Hajj. People are coming to Mecca from all over the world. And he tells them his rejection of Yazid. They hear the news and go back. Until the 8th of the Hijjah. Hajj starts on the 9th of the Hijjah. Yawm Arafah. He left on Yawm al-Tarwiyah, the 8th of the Hijjah. What happened there, Imam al-Hussein got news that they sent him about 30 trained soldiers whose job is to kill him in secret wherever he is, even if he happens to be right next to the Kaaba. So the plan is you kill him, then you say, what a sad event. The grandson of the Prophet is killed in Kaaba. Let's hold a huge funeral. Let Yazid organize the funeral. And let's say what a sad thing that happened, and then benefit from the death of Hussein. What does Hussein do? People are heading to Mecca. He's leaving Mecca. But he takes the main road again. So he's facing everybody who's coming to Mecca, he's facing them. He's going the other way. And he has those conversations with people. Tells them what he's doing. And at the time, a lot of people couldn't understand what he's doing, because to them, there were two options. You lead a revolution and you win, or you give up. This third strategy nobody thought of it at the time. They couldn't understand, why would you tell so many people, raise so much support, and then let them go? You see, there's a really interesting incident when Imam Hossein heard the news of the death of Aqil. Now, Imam Hossein is the son of commanders. He was born in the household of the head of a state, the Prophet. He grew up in an environment where he knows exactly how to lead armies, and he was 57, right? I know that if I hear the news of the murder of Muslim in Aqil, what do? Stand up and say, they have started the attack on us, let us go, let's build our forces, let's go fight them, the usual stuff. Hussein stands up and says, they've killed Muslim in Aqil, you're free to go. Okay. That's odd. Okay, if they are free to go, he should go as well. No, he continues the journey, but they're free to go. If you want to fight, you take your soldiers and go. If you want to give up, everybody goes home. Why would you let most of your soldiers go and then you go on your own? The point is, he wanted them to stay alive to report the news and to understand the message. If they died with him, what's the point? He knew he had enough impact. If he and the small number of people with him were killed, that's enough impact. What is left is preserving life and preserving religion. And you see, when you kind of read through the text in history, you see how a lot of people were puzzled, didn't get this. Let me give you some examples. As he was leaving Mecca, his brother Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah says, why go to Iraq? That's an important place. Your dad has a lot of support. There are armies that will be raised there. And these people it's a mixed environment. They may not be reliable. They might not support you. Go to Yemen. And puts a lot of pressure on him. He says, I'll think about it. In the morning, he leaves heading to Iraq. Muhammad ibn Hanafiyyah hears the news. Comes to him and says, didn't you tell me you'll think about it? He says, yes, I did. Well, he said, I had a dream at night. I saw my grandfather, the Prophet. He told me, Sha Allahu an yaraka qatila. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed to see you dead. I said, okay. If this is what's happening, why are you taking the women and children? Now that doesn't make sense. He says, Sha Allahu an yarahunna sabaya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to see them, willed to see them as prisoners of war. In other words, I have to go and get killed, and they have to go and spread the message. But you don't know this yet, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So he heads on the way. As he's leaving, Abdullah ibn Umar stops him. Hears of the news, rushes to him, stops him. Says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to Iraq. Says, you know what this is happening. They will send an army and kill you. Imam Hossein thanks him for his words. Abdullah ibn Umar, but you see how the news is spreading, how people are aware of what's happening. Says, can you reveal the part of your body and your stomach that the Prophet used to kiss? I want to kiss that part of your body and say goodbye. So Imam Hossein revealed, lifted his shirt, and he kissed his chest 3 times and said, this is farewell, Hussein. And then Imam al-Hussein heads on the way. Now the option of him being silenced is very difficult. He can either speak or be killed publicly. Essentially now Imam al-Hussein drove the situation to a win-win situation. Let me talk or kill me in public. I've won basically. I've won the moment I was in that position. Which is why you see on the day of Ashura, Imam Hossein is always talking about, you have two options. Either let me go and spread my word and say what I want to say, or let me continue to Iraq to my supporters. Well, they can't let him because he will raise an army, so they will have to stop him. But he wasn't going to stop, so they will kill him. The only option. And this is how he turned that situation, this very difficult position, this new position. And nobody understood the gravity. Few did, but the majority didn't, including Yazid, the gravity of the consequences of committing something like this. And Hussein had it all planned with the right number of people. He had already sent the vast majority of his supporters away, gave them permission to go. And so when we think of the events and think he is somebody who couldn't raise enough people, they let him down, he didn't have the right support, that's actually missing a lot of the facts. He had tens of thousands in Basra. He had tens of thousands on the way between Mecca and Medina, between Mecca and Iraq. He had tens of thousands in Kufa. Some were prisoners, some were away. And he could have waited a bit longer and would have had an army from Yemen and Egypt. They were both supporters of Imam Ali. He could have. But would have been a civil war for decades that would have ended ruining Islam, tarnishing Islam, and then some other force comes and takes everything. And so he knew better. But for this event, partly because of who the enemy is, and partly because of the plan by Hussein, that it needed to have a huge sacrifice. It needed to hit people so deep that nobody could numb it and say, I'm not going to think about it. And that's why it had so much impact in the world, and it does today. Today, my sisters, my brothers, there is a battle today between the followers of Yazid in Daesh and the thugs of Daesh and those terrorists who the only thing they enjoy is slaughtering heads and mutilating bodies and eating pieces of people like Hind did back in the days. It's the same legacy. And who are the biggest enemies of Daesh? They say it's the followers of Ahlul Bayt. That's you. They give us the honor. They put us in the category of Hussein. They know we are the category of Hussein, and they are the category of Yazid. And so when we remember this, we remember it the same way, with the confidence that we will win, like Hussein won, like we will always win, but with the tragedy for the losses that we incur. And statistically, the most number of people killed by Daesh are Shia. It's the same legacy unfolding. It's the battle between the purity of religion and Islam and from its true sources, and a system that wants to use Islam to form a state that will kill and destroy people. A terrorist organization. Exactly the same legacy. And so we should have the confidence that Hussein and his family had, despite the numbers, despite the difficulties. What he knew, they didn't know. And on the eve of Ashura, at a time like this, Imam Zain al-Abidin reports that he hears his father recite these lines of poetry. He's kind of saying it to himself, and he wants to make sure Imam Zain al-Abidin hears it. He's mending his sword, straightening his sword, and recites these famous lines of poetry. That he's talking to time, to life, that life doesn't have a friend. That one day you turn against people and they end up being killed and maimed. يا دهر أف لك من خليلي كم لك بالإشراق والأصيل من صاحب وطالب قتيل والدهر لا يقنع بالبديل. This time doesn't accept a replacement for me. It had to be Hussein. Nobody else can fulfill that role. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, I heard him say it 3 times. I knew what he meant. Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam heard it. Goes to Al-Imam al-Hussein, says, Hussein, are you announcing your death to me, Hussein? I know what these words mean. He calms her down, tells her to be patient, tells her there is so much more pain to come. Now is the time of patience, because there is so much more that awaits Zainab alayhi salam. Then the day of Ashura, Ahlul Bayt go one after the other, starting with Ali al-Akbar. And the family says their goodbye. You know how goodbye is difficult, right? Those goodbye moments when you know somebody is going for a few weeks is hard. What if you know that they're going to death? And so people were hugging their loved ones, their children, their husbands, their brothers, and saying their goodbyes. And Imam al-Hussein had to say the goodbye to each and every one of them. Ali al-Akbar, I told you the story yesterday. When Ali al-Akbar was heading to battle, Imam al-Hussein hugged him and said, this is the one that resembles the Prophet. And cried and cried and cried. And then Ali al-Akbar goes to battle, and they all say, Alayka minni salam, Aba Abdullah. They always say this final farewell. And then they come back mutilated and killed to the tent. And then the next one, Qasim, Al-Abbas, the brothers of Abbas. If you had a brother like Abbas and he goes just to get you some water on the family, and then you end up going to find him away next to the river, his arms cut, his eye blocked, the other eye had an arrow in it, his head smashed with a pole. And you hug Abbas and cry, and Abbas dies in your hands. And you go report to Zainab. You tell her, I found Abbas there far away from the rest of us, and Abbas is died there, and he comes back without him. And Zainab and Kulthum had to see all of this. And then Al-Imam al-Hussein remains on his own. He raises his voice, says, هَلْ مِنْ ذَابٍ عَنْ حُرَمِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. Is there anyone that would stand up here today and support and protect the family of Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet? Is there anyone, he says it at the loudest of his voice, and there's no response. All those who wanted to switch sides have already done. What is left are the thugs out there. So Hussein raises his voice and says, هَلْ مِن مُوَحِّدٍ يَخَافُ اللَّهَ فِينَا. Is there anyone that believes in a Lord, there is a single God, that would fear God for us? Fear God that He wouldn't kill us? And no one responds. And then, but when he announces this to the enemy, the family hears it. When he gets the message across to his killers, his family hear that message. And then you get the response. You get the response in the tents. He says, هَلْ مِن مُغِيثٍ يَرْجُ اللَّهَ فِي إِغَاثَتِنَا. Is there anyone that would support us on a day like this? And then Imam Zayn al-Abidin, weak, tries to stand up to go to battle. But he couldn't handle the battle. Imam Hussein says, send him back. He shouldn't go. If he goes, there wouldn't be anyone left from the household of the Prophet. And then Al-Imam al-Hussein goes to battle. He raises his voice, Zainab, Kulthum, Sukayna, Fatima, goodbye from me. And goes to the battlefield. He fights them bravely, asks them for some water, they refuse to give him water. He's so thirsty, historians say, that his tongue is completely dry, like a piece of wood. He asks them for water, they say no. He comes and says, give me my young baby. I want to say goodbye to him. I want to see Abdullah, the 6-month-old baby, so I can hug him for the last time and say goodbye. They say, this baby is about to die. He's thirsty. His mother couldn't nurse anymore. Can you get him some water? And he takes him to the enemy. He asks them for some water for the baby. And then after they struggle and the baby is so small, the man, Harmala, that you know, spots the baby's neck, takes his arrow and points it in that direction and kills the baby in Hussein's arms. The baby opens his arms, raises them and hugs his father. And Hussein takes the baby back to the tent. Imagine the mother of the baby receiving her newborn, 6-month-old baby. This infant slaughtered. And Hussein has to watch all of that. And then Hussein heads back, decides to go back to the battlefield. Sukaina stops him, according to some narrations. She says, my father, Ahlul Bayt, had a style. When somebody is orphaned, they would sit them on their lap. They would kindly wipe their head to kind of pass the news that your father has died, has been killed. She says, I remember when the news about Muslim ibn Aqil came, you sat Hamida bin Muslim on your lap and you did this. You were calming her down, you were supporting her. Father, if you go to battle and die, who's going to do that? I'll have nobody. Can you do it before you go? Can you put me on your lap and treat me like an orphan? Because I want to know what that feels like. I want the support of my father before he goes to battle. And then he does that. And Hussein heads back to battle. And he once again announces himself, I am Hussein ibn Ali. And death is better than humiliation for us. And we're fighting for the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. القتل أولى من ركوب العار والعار أولى من دخول النار. And Imam Hossein goes to battle and the family hears that. He says, أنا الحسين ابن علي آلت ألا أنثني أحمي عيالات أبي أمضي على دين النبي. These are the words of Hussein on the day of Ashura. That's what it sounded like on the day of Ashura. And Hussein heads to the battlefield. And then they fight them so bravely. And they can see him and they couldn't defeat him. Then Umar ibn Sa'ad, the leader of the opposition, says, throw arrows at Hussein. And the arrows came, historians say, like rain. They hit every part of Hussein's body. He stops to rest. In that moment, a man by the name of Salih bin Wahab takes his spear and aims for the back of Hussein. He hits Hussein. Hussein falls from his horse to the ground. The man falls on his right cheek, historians say. He's weak. He's standing there waiting. There is no support. And a man takes a rock and throws it, which hits Hussein on his forehead. And Imam al-Hussein starts to bleed on his face. He takes his shirt to wipe the blood. Imam al-Hussein's chest gets exposed. Another man has a 3-pronged arrow, aims it for the chest of Hussein. The arrow comes fast into Hussein. It goes very deep in the heart of Hussein. Imam al-Hussein announces his death almost. He says, Bismillah wa billah wa ala millati Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He leans forward, pushes the arrow, it comes back of his back, and blood gushes out of Hussein's back. And then he falls to the ground. Then he holds his hands together and takes the blood and throws it to the sky. And then says, Oh Allah, this is on your path. If this pleases you, then take as much as you want until you're happy. Ilahi, in kana hadha yurdik, fakhudh hatta tarda laka al-utba ya Rab. And then he says he takes that blood and wipes his face and his beard. He says, this is how I want to meet my grandfather, covered in my own blood, so he knows what people have done to me. And then Hussein, in those moments, Zainab sees him. Zainab raises her voice, Wa Husseina! Wa Husseina! And then Hussein, in those moments, just lying there. And they look at him and they stare at him and encircle him. Then they come again, some of them with swords, and some throw arrows, and some throw spears at Hussein. A man comes forward to prepare to slaughter Hussein, to cut the head of Hussein. And then Zainab screams at the army, screams the head of the army, Hussein is killed and you stand and watch. And even the enemy starts crying then. He turns away and they continue with their slaughter. And Hussein in those moments, lying there, the son of Imam al-Hassan runs to him, tries to protect him. And then the son of Imam al-Hassan gets killed in the lap of Hussein. And then the man comes again, sits on Hussein's chest, prepares the sword. He prepares to cut the head of Hussein to slaughter him. And Hussein says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Bismillah wa billah. And then the man proceeds and cuts the head of Hussein. Zainab in the tent asks Imam Zayn al-Abidin, says, what is happening? I see there's a change in the sky. I see something is going wrong. What is happening? Tell me. He says, just lift that part of the tent so I can see. She does that. He says, Amma Zainab, tahayya'i lis-sami. Prepare to be taken a prisoner of war. I can see the head of Hussein. I can see it up there in the sky on a spear. Hussein is dead and now we're left with nothing. Hussein is gone. And then the family prepared to be attacked now. There's no Hussein to defend. And they come and attack the women and children and they burn their tents. And Ahlul Bayt go through that turmoil having just lost Hussein. And the body of Hussein, then they bring horses to break his chest while he's dead. They bring horses to kind of go on him, on his back and on his front, just to kind of vent the hatred they had for Hussein and for Ahlul Bayt. But Hussein sacrificed and knew the result was always one. And the family had something else to continue to deliver that message. And tonight will always be a night, and tomorrow will always be a day where the whole world stops. And only one word, pretty much one phrase is heard. The phrase of Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. This is where you hear all over the world. And then the name of Hussein remains, and the followers of Hussein remain, and the legacy of Hussein remains. Brothers and sisters, let us raise our hands towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to pray that He may grant us patience and grant us tears for Hussein and energy and confidence from Hussein, so that we can fight the enemies of Hussein and spread the message of peace of Hussein and succeed like he succeeded, but this time under the banner of his grandchild, Al-Imam al-Mahdi ajallahu ta'ala farajah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala include our names amongst his supporters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all health and give us what we ask for, grant us our wishes, protect our communities. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين.